All right, we are returning to our Fantasy Premier League coverage. It is a brand new season this weekend. It is game week 1, which means everybody is interested in Fantasy Premier League. One person who's been interested at all times, and of course we'll go all the way to game week 38, is Dave Moore of Today FM. Dave, you are an expert, a legend of Fantasy Premier League, I've been informed.
Yeah, if expertise is finishing really poorly due to transfer addiction, then absolutely, that is me. I lose so many points because I'm constantly kind of going, okay, I know it'll cost me 4 points to get rid of him, but I could make 5 points, and I make -1 point, and it's just the worst.
Okay, so this is your tactic. You are a maverick. You go out and chase points no matter what the points cost.
Yeah, I shouldn't, and I tell myself every season, I say, no, don't put 2 12 million midfielders in and have a terrible bench. Do something, make sure your bench can work for you. But then I don't. I have like a 4 million, a 4.5 million, whatever, and I'm sitting there going, haha, this is it. And then, no, every week I just get let down.
You remind me of my dad, who rings me on a Sunday evening, delighted with himself when two of his midfielders have scored twice in the Sunday games. And I'd say, but I didn't think you had them in your team. He's, I did 6 transfers, though, on Friday night. Yeah. But you've literally lost points. You have lost points even with them both scoring twice.
Yeah, that's definitely
getting to game week 38 is a good point, though, because I like listening. The professor who won it last year, is like, clearly he's a professor, so he's somebody very successful in life. There's the guy, the chess grandmaster, who was right in contention to win it. There's a certain discipline involved in fantasy football that says a lot about a person, that actually you can go 38 weeks of the year and remember without fail to update your fantasy football team.
That was the hardest thing I thought about the post-lockdown thing, was when the games came thick and fast. It was like, because you're used to this kind of week on, and occasionally you'd be like, oh, don't forget there's a Friday game, or City are playing twice this weekend, or whatever it is. It's some kind of, little bit of information going around. But all of a sudden it was like, yeah, so the game's starting on Thursday, ending on a Friday, starting on Sunday, beginning on Tuesday. You're like, what's happening? Like, you just couldn't cope with that.
And it's not actually going to be too dissimilar at certain points this season as well. I think now, I think sometimes you can talk about the professor, you can talk about Magnus Carlsen. Of course, they're on like a whole different level to some people potentially. But I genuinely believe the number one thing for success in Fantasy Premier League this season is persistence. As you say, just sticking with it for the whole thing, because it's nothing to do with like football knowledge come the end of the season. It's just to do with the fact that you've checked the fixtures and you realize, most importantly, if your team is not playing or if your team is playing twice. I really think that if you have a bad start, but you're there in and around game week 20, when the Carabao Cup fixtures are starting to be rescheduled, when you've got those doubles and those blanks coming, that is when you can make real hay. And there ain't that much intuition involved in actually making benefits from those weeks, I think.
I think captaincy plays a big role as well. I don't know how these people do it, but like when some random Brighton defender gets a hat-trick, and like you look at the team of the week and you're like, how did he choose to triple captain him? And he's got 90-something points. I don't understand it.
Well, it's funny you pick Brighton defender, because isn't one of the great stories of last season's, or was it the previous season, was that somebody triple captained Shane Duffy.
Shane Duffy, yes.
When Shane Duffy came off the bench and scored an own goal.
That can happen. Dave, how do you go about, I know you're a big Manchester United fan, so do you find it tough to pick Liverpool players, to pick Manchester City players, or do all club loyalties go out the window for Fantasy Premier League?
I wish I had the cold calculating head of Magnus Carlsen. No, I always have 3 Man United players, no matter how badly they're doing. And in the last 7 years, it's been obviously yet another Achilles heel of mine. Yeah, I mean, Liverpool, it was easier to ignore them for a while, but when Mo Salah is consistently doing what Mo Salah does and Sadio Mane is coming in second, you're just like, oh, Jesus. And then the defenders kill you. I mean, like, let's be honest, you can't have a fantasy Premier League team and not have Trent. Like, it's just impossible. He's an absolute must-have. So you can make decisions between Aubameyang, who obviously has moved back from a forward to a midfielder this season, and maybe Aubameyang is your choice over Salah for the same kind of money. But your defense has to have Trent in it. So I'm sitting there going, bloody hell, I've got to pick this guy. And then he's expensive too. So he's stealing some of your money. But yeah, I think, look, you have to try and park your loyalties, but I think actually Man United and Man City obviously don't play the first game week 1, right? So you would argue that, okay, shoot those players out, get the lads in. But I have probably the strongest bench I've ever had. So currently, I have Nyland in goal as a kind of a 4 million keeper, but I have De Bruyne, Bruno Fernandez, and Jack Grealish on my bench. Because my logic is, if I want to buy these players after game week 1, they're going to cost me so much money. But if I put them on the bench now, I have them for game week 2.
Jack Grealish, that is, I must say, a bit of a wild card. I didn't expect you to have him on your bench. We may just start with that. What was the thought process behind bringing in Grealish, given you've already got a lot of money spent on other options in your midfield? So just to clarify, is it just De Bruyne and Bruno, or have you gone for another premium midfielder?
Yeah, I have gone for premium midfielder. So this game week 1 currently, and look, this is not, we're not quite at game week 1, so this may change a lot. But currently, I have a 2-man midfield, which seems crazy, but that's because when I look at the Man United players, the one I want in there is Bruno. When I look at the Man City players, the one I want in there is De Bruyne. And then I looked around at the other. I mean, Burnley aren't playing obviously as well, and Villa. I think that's an important thing that people won't necessarily have in their minds, is that there are 2 other clubs that won't play because Man City and Man United are postponed. But yeah, I don't think 5-2-3 is a winning formation for the season, but currently that's where I'm at. So Aubameyang and Lundstram are the 2 I've got in there. As I said, I just think your choices, for me anyway, are you're going to spend big on a midfielder. It's going to be either Aubameyang or Salah, or maybe if you're able to do it, you might do both. But I've got Aubameyang, De Bruyne, Fernandez as my kind of big spends.
Should we talk about the elephant in the room of this year's game? That they've made an absolute balls of it by putting every good player in as a midfielder.
Yeah.
That they haven't moved with modern football, whereby teams play with 3 up front. So you have Salah and Mane as midfielders. You have Aubameyang as a midfielder. Aubameyang is not a midfielder.
Rashford and Greenwood are now midfielders.
It's madness.
This is a good thing. This is a really positive thing.
Why is it positive on?
Because you've got 5 midfield slots and you've got 3 forward slots. That, I presume, is the reason why they've done this, is that you can actually make it was too easy before. It was too easy when you were like, well, Aubameyang, that's definitely a forward slot. If Salah and Mane are down as forwards, well, that's definitely another forward slot. So you're basically deciding, do I go for Danny Ings or Alexander Mitrovic as your forward? And that's your front 3 boxed off. They want to make it more challenging for people. And my front 3 are categorically shite at the moment as a result of it. That would not be the case if Aubameyang was a forward. So this is an added complication. I like this, but it is obviously...
It's a huge added complication, and I think it's going to cause a lot of frustration because, as you know, you're trying to balance those first couple of weeks, as Dave is, with Bruno Fernandez, Raheem Sterling, Kevin De Bruyne, players like that. But one of those players, when you throw in the likes of Heung-min Son as well, one of those players is going to have a good week every week. And the most people can really have, in all likelihood, is maybe 2 of them. So you're just hoping that somehow, and if you don't, and in all likelihood to be your captain, you're going to lose a load of ground.
Yeah.
No, that is true. That is absolutely true. And it does make it makes it far more challenging to pick out the right captain at the right time, I think, because they're so expensive, those midfielders. But you look at them and you go, well, points return, they're justifiably expensive. So yeah, it's difficult. And then don't forget the transfer window is open till October 5th. So for example, that's another reason why Grealish was in my mind, Owen, was because if this rumoured Manchester United move, which I actually don't think will happen, but I do think he might go somewhere before October 5th, all of a sudden you have a player going to a premium club where hopefully he'll be surrounded by better players, will play better. He scores well regardless, even at Villa. So then all of a sudden you're kind of going, well, is he my second or my third Man United player?
Never mind that. Like the 3 most expensive players, Sheahan, are Aubameyang, Mane, and Salah at 12 million. What if actually Lionel Messi goes, you know what, screw this, I am out of here? What does Lionel Messi cost?
13, I would say.
Is he
13.
15?
Maybe. I'd say 13.5, possibly.
They probably have Messi down as a midfielder.
They would have Messi in the absolute
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
does the fact that City and United play in week 2 complicate things from a wildcard point of view? Because I'm coming at this from a bit of time away from fantasy. My brother has convinced me to take it up again this year, but I was one of those players who held on to the wildcard for as long as possible. I'd be on week 36 still going on. I'm not going to use it yet. I'm basically shitting myself in case I blow it. So does the City United thing maybe make people use the wildcard a bit earlier this year?
I think that's a real possibility. I think that people could go in week 1 with a plan, use wildcard, because there's theories around wildcards that I've heard. One is obviously that you have 2 in the season. So you've one up to Christmas and you've one after Christmas. So you could use your one early in maybe, I mean, game week 1 is really early, but or game week 2, whatever. But then there's another one coming in January. Or I've heard other people, the theory is, no, you wait and use it as close to Christmas as possible, and then use the other one in game week 36. Yeah. And then that can kind of give you that final boost. I don't know which one is right. I've never gotten it right, so I'm no authority from that point of view. But I think there will be people who will use a wild card in game week 2, definitely.
For sure. And the point that you touched on there about the transfer window is interesting, because certainly you wouldn't be using your second wild card any season before February 1st. At least you could wait to see how the January market would go, and then you make your move. So I think it's kind of a two-pronged thing. You're right with the 4 blanks in game week 1. There's also going to be a little bit of chaos with COVID, you expect, over the first couple of weeks. And you've got a transfer market that is still open. This is going to be an early wildcard season for everyone. I'm thinking game week 6 as the latest. But a lot of people do it after game week 1, because you get the form. And in this season, you get United and City players into your team.
Should there be a new rule that if your player gets COVID, you get a free transfer?
Well, that's like, what is seriously going to be a thing? I mean, already we know Emerick Laporte and Riyad Mahrez are, have been diagnosed. Paul Pogba's been diagnosed. I know there's an extra week, so I think sure he'll be fine and whatever, will be back. But this is going to happen throughout the season, that there'll be, this player has been diagnosed, so therefore he's just going to, and that could be Friday evening, that could be Saturday, morning after the deadline. And
well, as well, Dave, and listen, if you take fantasy football seriously, you do your research and you try and get any little edge that you have, and then so when you hear of, say, Manchester City players, well, you're obviously trying to get onto their social media, and who were they on holidays with? Oh, they were in Ayia Napa. Well, let's see who else was in Ayia Napa. Could they have been in the same restaurant the same night? And suddenly, maybe that's the edge you can get. If you can predict which players are going to get COVID, you can get them out of your team. Boom.
The annoying thing is that they're all friends players from other teams. Like the whole problem that Foden and Greenwood had at the England camp, and their misjudgment of everything they did. Like, they're rival clubs, but they're best mates. So this is difficult social stuff to keep a track on.
It's okay for Premier League commentators like Nathan Murphy, who commit to researching every week regardless, so they have a head start on the rest of us. But
yeah, Misha and Dave have real jobs.
Yeah, trying to find the time to, I don't know, Dave, when, do you be sitting there glued to the team news? Do you be sitting with a pen and paper researching for a few hours each week? Or how do you go about it? Because we're not all Premier League commentators like Nathan Murphy.
No, we're not. I wish I was. No, I don't. I keep an eye on Sky Sports News on a Friday, and I keep an eye on YouTube for the manager's press conferences. So I will have a look. I mean, you don't glean too much, but I suppose it really is that kind of Friday evening is kind of my bulk. The bulk of my work is like, okay, sit down. Who do I think is going to do well this week? I used to actually play a football prediction game called Predicta, and you would also predict the scores rather than fancy football. It was like just basically betting on the scores. And I found that actually was when I performed best at fantasy football, was when I was in tandem, I was doing Predicta. So I would look at it and say, I think that might be a 3-1 win for whoever, for Spurs. And then I'd go, well, if I think that, then I should probably put a Spurs player in my fantasy team. So they were kind of feeding into each other. And I had a couple of half-decent seasons where I didn't utterly embarrass myself. But look, par for the course for me is, like, as I said, finishing 3,000th in my own league, which is just so.
Well, on that, sorry, I've let you have 15 minutes here. And I don't want listeners and viewers to think that I'm just here as a random other person with an interest in fantasy football. I know you've had the professor and you can talk about your chess grandmasters. I'm here because I'm an expert and extremely successful at fantasy football. So I will remind you that back in 08-09, I finished 32nd in fantasy football. Second in Ireland.
12 years ago.
Doesn't matter.
12 years ago.
I'm just looking back through my rankings. So what is a good ranking? Because I'm looking here. Around that time, I had 4 years in a row where I finished inside the top 20,000.
Yeah,
I haven't had one of them in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But the numbers have obviously have grossly mushroomed in the last years. Like, I remember I started playing fantasy football in the 90s, because I'm older than all of you boys.
In the Star.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. There was a website, but God, it was so terrible.
I ran as my transition year project a company that did a fantasy football league within the school, And I did it from the start. Oh my God, it was the most time consuming. And I was in transition. It was a waste of time. So I basically charged everyone a tenner to enter my own fantasy football league. And it was based off the star. But I spent all Monday evening then for 8 hours having to manually collate everybody's scores.
This is why you fit second in the world.
Well, exactly. Yeah, this is. Yeah, I put the work in at the time.
Yeah, no, look, I think my rankings would not inspire confidence in anybody. But like I said, I justify it by saying I enjoy fantasy football immensely every Friday. You know, a tie from down the road, Coke Zero, ice cold, and sit down and go, right, how are we going to wreck it this week, lads?
That is a war room.
Yeah.
Right, so let's actually just get the rest of your team there and what else you're thinking, Dave. Like, I must say, I'm just looking at Grealish's ownership. I was at around 12%, so he's obviously owned by a lot more people than I had given you credit for, Dave. What else are you looking for in the forwards? Let's go with your 3 forwards.
Okay, my 3 forwards, obviously I've overloaded the midfield and I've overloaded looking at game week 2 currently. So my forwards are the Danny Ings is definitely in there. I do think Danny Ings is going to do well. I think Shea Adams actually might be a good shout for Southampton as well. But I suppose it'll be one or the other. And obviously Danny Ings did so well last season. I'm kind of putting faith in him. Rodrigo at Leeds. I think a lot of people are making the choice between Rodrigo and Mitrovic. And I like Rodrigo. I'm a Spanish football nerd as well, so I've kind of seen him over the years do things. So I don't know. He's not 20 goals a season, but I do think if Leeds are going to do well, he'll be part of that.
That's very interesting. So he's on 7.7% ownership. Mitrovic is on 26.7% ownership. So it's a differential.
Yeah, they love Mitrovic. Well, look, he's good value. He's proven to a degree, but Fulham. I mean, first game is Arsenal.
Oh, Arsenal, sorry. Yeah.
Arsenal.
Fulham were terrible 2 years ago, and he got into double figures. So if you got that out of him again,
yeah, I think that's why he's so popular. My third one is Brewster at Liverpool, and I think I don't know how much he's going to play. He might even go on loan or something. I don't know.
Well, they're talking about him going on a permanent deal. So actually, he looks like he could be a great signing now because again, he's probably not going to get much game time at Liverpool. Yeah. But if he goes to one of those other sides if he goes to Palace or something like that, suddenly you've got 4.5 million who might end up playing quite a bit.
Yeah, no, because I was surprised because often what I'll do is I'll put that in as the cost. I'll put down 4.5 and see is there anyone there that any name you'd even recognize. And I saw him and I just went, do you know what? He's worth if you're looking for a 4.5, he's worth it. You probably shouldn't be. You should be looking for a couple of sixes and a 9 or whatever. But yeah, that's what I've gone with the most. So Ings, Rodrigo, and Brewster. Yeah, like I said, with a bench that would embarrass anybody.
But there you go. This is what I'm talking about, a front 3 that we can actually be interested in. If this was 12 months ago, we'd be saying your front 3, oh yeah, quite boring, let's move on. We've actually got to put in a bit of effort. I like the Ryan Brewster pick, especially if there's a bit of future potential there. Let's go to the back then. I assume you've picked Trent Alexander-Arnold, considering you've just said he's essential.
Yeah, Trent is in there. And then everyone else is kind of... I've gone with James at Chelsea. Chelsea are a really interesting team. You would look at their transfer window and go, oh my God, they're going to blow everyone away and win the league. But they're bringing in so many players. I don't know how they're all going to gel really quickly. But I think there's a couple of good value players in there. Look, Havertz is an unbelievable signing. He's scored so much from midfield. You would think he's probably worth a punt. But I don't know. James, for me, is someone who performed so well last season, a little bit under the radar. I think he's 5, is he? I think maybe 5 million or something like that. So He's not massively expensive. I do think he'll play in most weeks because I don't know, Chilwell, he's certainly not match fit yet. I'm happy with him for now. I've gone for, heard this guy Salisu at Southampton? He's some new signing. He's cheap as chips. Southampton have done pretty good stuff in the transfer market before. I've taken a punt on him. Ayling at Leeds is also pretty cheap, but again, he's an attacking. Because obviously that's why Trent is so successful. Liverpool don't have the best defensive record, but Trent is just so potent, and Ayling isn't quite up at that standard, but he's there. And then I had 4 million left, so I went with Burr at Wolves again, just because I saw him a few times last season, and he played, and I had 4 million to spend. So I don't know how strong. Certainly on game week 1 as a back 5, I'm not massively inspired with confidence, but I had to get them in there somewhere.
And who are your 2 goalkeepers then, just to get a greater sense of your defence?
McCarthy, Southampton. I think again, value for money is just, he's really hard to ignore. And Nyland is just kind of sitting there as a 4 million. But I think McCarthy is he 4.5 or 5, maybe 4.5 or 5. But he's certainly good enough value for me to kind of go, look, you know what, that's the keeper I need in there. So so that's so the team is, so 2 goalkeepers, McCarthy and Nyland, 5 at the back, Alexander-Arnold, Salisu, James, Ayling and Burr. I've got Aubameyang and Lundstrom starting with De Bruyne, Fernandez and Grealish on the bench, and Ings, Rodrigo and Brewster up front. So, like I said, it's a bit of a strategic one rather than a gut feeling. So we'll see how that pans out for me.
Bruno Fernandez gets COVID on Sunday week.
Sancho will be in very soon. Jadon Sancho straight in.
Yeah, what do we think about the transfer market? Is there anything, are we hearing anything else? I mean, Sancho's obviously the big one, but like there's Reguilon, this Real Madrid left back that people are talking about maybe coming to Old Trafford, and
James Rodriguez as well. I'd say his ownership has flown up just because of the star status of his name, but I assume a lot of people are going to have him in the team. Maybe he'll be class. Who knows? He plays well under Ancelotti, so he's one that maybe could be a sneaky one.
One I would recommend for the defence, if you're looking for lower priced, is Tariq Lamptey at Brighton.
Lamptey, yes. Right
back. Brilliant last season. They brought him in from Chelsea last January and is going to be the first choice right back, I would expect, all season. And bombs up and down. Now, didn't score a lot of goals, but I think he's only 4.5 million. Yeah. And another one, keep it Irish, Daryl Shea. Very cheap. Probably going to play every week for West Brom. Not going to get you a huge amount of clean sheets, but might nick you the odd one here and there.
Are there any free kick taking defenders? I know, like obviously Trent is one. Van Aanholt, Luca Dean, yeah. They're not cheap though.
Do you get
one of the most expensive?
Do you get an assist for winning a penalty? I assume you do.
You do.
Like Donny van de Beek, I think, has some serious stats in the Eredivisie for winning penalties, which will have Bruno Fernandez licking his lips. But
that's the only way.
Is there a Manchester United player who doesn't have incredible statistics for winning penalties?
Fair point.
I think that bubble is going to burst, I think, this season. But just on the defenders, and Irish players, I find it very interesting that we're not really talking about Matt Doherty, and he's got an ownership of 26.2%. He's 6 million. He was the top scoring defender, not from Liverpool last season, of course, playing as a wing back. Are we just totally writing off Matt Doherty as a fantasy prospect because he's expensive and he plays for Jose Mourinho?
Jose is the big factor for me. Yeah. I think he is going to have his, whatever you would call this, pre-season, post-season weird holiday thing, where he'll do what he does with his team. And I just don't think adventurous fullbacks, he's not going to play a 5. He's going to, because at Wolves, wasn't Doherty in a 5?
Yeah.
And now he's going to be in a 4, I think. So I'd love to be wrong because I think Ireland need him to be doing really well. But I just think his demand on him is going to be a lot more defensive than offensive this season under Jose, is my gut.
Final one then. Who are you putting the armband on this week?
Aubameyang. There's just, like, he did it to Liverpool in the Community Shield. I know you can't really take that as anything more than a pre-season friendly, but he just looked sharp, won the penalty, scored a goal. Like, based on whatever you've seen in this kind of weird period before the season starts, he just, and playing against a side like Fulham, I think Arsenal should have the beatings of them, and then he should be well able to take care of that and get me some points. So that's my plan.
All right. Dave Moore of Today FM, it's been a pleasure picking your brains on what you're looking at for the season ahead. Thanks a million for joining us.